Kyrgyzstan, Russian, or, officially the Kyrgyz Republic, formerly known as Kyrgyzia, is a country located in Central Asia. Landlocked and mountainous, Kyrgyzstan is bordered by Kazakhstan to the north, Uzbekistan to the west, Tajikistan to the southwest and China to the east. Its capital and largest city is Bishkek. Kyrgyzstan's history spans over 2,000 years, encompassing a variety of cultures and empires. Although geographically isolated by its highly mountainous terrain, which has helped preserve its ancient culture, Kyrgyzstan has historically been at the crossroads of several great civilizations, namely as part of the Silk Road and other commercial and cultural routes. Though long inhabited by a succession of independent tribes and clans, Kyrgyzstan has periodically come under foreign domination and attained sovereignty as a nation-state only after the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. Since independence, Kyrgyzstan has officially been a unitary parliamentary republic, although it continues to endure ethnic conflicts, revolts, economic troubles, transitional governments, and political party conflicts. Kyrgyzstan is a member of the Commonwealth of Independent States, the Eurasian Economic Union, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Turkic Council, the Turksoy Community and the United Nations. Ethnic Kyrgyz make up the majority of the country's 5.7 million people, followed by significant minorities of Uzbeks and Russians. The official language, Kyrgyz, is closely related to the other Turkic languages, although Russian remains widely spoken, a legacy of a century-long policy of Russification. The majority of the population are non-denominational Muslims. In addition to its Turkic origins, Kyrgyz culture bears elements of Persian, Mongolian, and Russian influence. Etymology: Kyrgyz is believed to have been derived from the Turkic word for 40, in reference to the 40 clans of Manis, a legendary hero who united 40 regional clans against Thugars. Literally, Kyrgyz means we are 40. At the time, in the early 9th century AD, Thugars dominated much of Central Asia, Mongolia, and parts of Russia and China. The 40-ray sun on the flag of Kyrgyzstan is a reference to those same 40 tribes, and the graphical element in the sun center depicts the wooden crown of a yurt, a portable dwelling traditionally used by nomads in the steppes of Central Asia. History. Antiquity. According to David C. King, Scythians were early settlers in present-day Kyrgyzstan. The Kyrgyz state reached its greatest expansion after defeating the Khaganate in 840 AD. From the 10th century the Kyrgyz migrated as far as the Tian Shan range and maintained their dominance over this territory for about 200 years. In the 12th century the Kyrgyz dominion had shrunk to the Altai range and Sayan mountains as a result of the Mongol expansion. With the rise of the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, the Kyrgyz migrated south. The Kyrgyz peacefully became a part of Mongol Empire in 1207. Chinese and Muslim sources of the 7th–12th centuries AD describe the early Kyrgyz as red-haired with white skin and blue eyes, which is indicative of ancient Indo-European tribes like the Slavic peoples. The descent of the Kyrgyz from the autochthonous Siberian population is confirmed on the other hand by the recent genetic studies. Because of the processes of migration, conquest, intermarriage, and assimilation, many of the Kyrgyz peoples that now inhabit Central and Southwest Asia are of mixed origins, often stemming from fragments of many different tribes, though they now speak closely related languages. Issyk-Kul Lake was a stopover on the Silk Road, a land route for traders, merchants and other travelers from the Far East to Europe. Kyrgyz tribes were overrun in the 17th century by the Mongol Oirats, in the mid-18th century by the Manchu Qing dynasty, and in the early 19th century by the Uzbek Khanate of Kokand. In the late 19th century, the majority part of what is today Kyrgyzstan was ceded to Russia through two treaties between China and Russia. The territory, then known in Russian as Kyrgyzia, was formally incorporated into the Russian Empire in 1876. The Russian takeover was met with numerous revolts against Tsarist authority, and many of the Kyrgyz opted to move to the Pamir Mountains in Afghanistan. In addition, the suppression of the 1916 rebellion against Russian rule in Central Asia caused many Kyrgyz later to migrate to China. Since many ethnic groups in the region were split between neighboring states at a time when borders were more porous and less regulated, it was common to move back and forth over the mountains. Depending on where life was perceived as better, this might mean better rains for pasture or better government during oppression. Silk Road caravanserai utilized during the Islamic Golden Age. Kyrgyz Nomads, 1869–1870, by Vasily Vereshchagin. Kyrgyz Yurt, 1869–1870, by Vasily Vereshchagin. Kyrgyz people, a nomadic Kyrgyz family on the Golodnaya steppe in Uzbekistan, 1911, Prokud and Gorskia. Soviet Kyrgyzstan. Soviet power was initially established in the region in 1919, and the Kara-Kyrgyz Autonomous Oblast was created within the Russian SFSR. On 5 December 1936, the Kyrgyz Soviet Socialist Republic was established as a full republic of the Soviet Union. During the 1920s, Kyrgyzstan developed considerably in cultural, educational and social life. Literacy was greatly improved, and a standard literary language was introduced by imposing Russian on the populace. Economic and social development also was notable. Many aspects of Kyrgyz national culture were retained despite the suppression of nationalist activity under Joseph Stalin, who controlled the Soviet Union from the late 1920s until 1953. The early years of glasnost had little effect on the political climate in Kyrgyzstan. However, the republic's press was permitted to adopt a more liberal stance and to establish a new publication, Literatny Kyrgyzstan, by the Union of Writers. According to the last Soviet census in 1989, ethnic Kyrgyz made up only 22% of the residents of the northern city of Frunze, while more than 60% were Russians, Ukrainians, and people from other Slavic nations. In June 1990, ethnic tensions between Uzbeks and Kyrgyz surfaced in the Osh Oblast, where Uzbeks form a minority of the population. Attempts to appropriate Uzbek collective farms for housing development triggered the Osh riots. A state of emergency and curfew were introduced, and Askar Akayev, the youngest of 5 sons born into a family of collective farm workers, was elected president in October of that same year. By then, the Kyrgyzstan democratic movement had developed into a significant political force with support in parliament. In December 1990, the Supreme Soviet voted to change the republic's name to the Republic of Kyrgyzstan. The following January, Akayev introduced new government structures and appointed a new government composed mainly of younger, reform-oriented politicians. In February 1991, the name of the capital, Frunze, was changed back to its pre-revolutionary name of Bishkek. Despite these political moves toward independence, economic realities seemed to work against secession from the Soviet Union. In a referendum on the preservation of the Soviet Union in March 1991, 88.7% of the voters approved the proposal to retain the Soviet Union as a renewed federation. Nevertheless, secessionist forces pushed Kyrgyzstan's independence through in August of that same year. On 19 August 1991, when the State Emergency Committee assumed power in Moscow, there was an attempt to depose Akayev in Kyrgyzstan. After the coup collapsed the following week, Akayev and Vice President German Kuznetsov announced their resignations from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and the entire bureau and secretariat resigned. This was followed by the Supreme Soviet vote declaring independence from the Soviet Union on 31 August 1991 as the Republic of Kyrgyzstan. Independence in October 1991, Akayev ran unopposed and was elected president of the new independent republic by direct ballot, receiving 95% of the votes cast. Together with the representatives of 7 other republics that same month, he signed the Treaty of the New Economic Community. Finally, on 21 December 1991, Kyrgyzstan joined with the other 4 Central Asian republics to formally enter the new Commonwealth of Independent States. Kyrgyzstan gained full independence a few days later on 25 December 1991. The following day, on 26 December 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. In 1992, Kyrgyzstan joined the United Nations in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. On 5 May 1993, the official name changed from the Republic of Kyrgyzstan to the Kyrgyz Republic. In 2005, a popular uprising known as the Tulip Revolution took place after the parliamentary elections in March 2005. Forced President Askar Akayev's resignation on 4 April 2005. Opposition leaders formed a coalition, and a new government was formed under President Kurmanbek Bakiyev and Prime Minister Felix Kolov. The nation's capital was looted during the protests. Political stability appeared to be elusive, however, as various groups and factions allegedly linked to organized crime jockeyed for power. 3 of the 75 members of parliament elected in March 2005 were assassinated, and another member was assassinated on 10 May 2006 shortly after winning his murdered brother's seat in a by-election. All 4 are reputed to have been directly involved in major illegal business ventures. On 6 April 2010, civil unrest broke out in the town of Talis after a demonstration against government corruption and increased living expenses. The protests became violent, spreading to Bishkek by the following day. Protesters attacked President Bakiyev's offices, as well as state-run radio and television stations. There were conflicting reports that Interior Minister Moldamu Sakongatiyev had been beaten. On 7 April 2010, President Bakiyev imposed a state of emergency. Police and special services arrested many opposition leaders. In response, protesters took control of the internal security headquarters and a state television channel in the capital, Bishkek. Reports by Kyrgyzstan government officials indicated that at least 75 people were killed and 458 hospitalized in bloody clashes with police in the capital. Reports say that at least 80 people died as a result of clashes with police. A transition government, led by former Foreign Minister Rosa Otunbayeva, by 8 April 2010 had taken control of state media and government facilities in the capital, but Bakiyev had not resigned from office. President Bakiyev returned to his home in Jalalabad and stated his terms of resignation at a press conference on 13 April 2010. On 15 April 2010, Bakiyev left the country and flew to neighboring Kazakhstan, along with his wife and 2 children. The country's provisional leaders announced that Bakiyev signed a formal letter of resignation prior to his departure. Prime Minister Daniel Yuzanov accused Russia of supporting the protests. This accusation was denied by Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. Opposition members also called for the closing of the US-controlled Manas Air Base. Russia's President Dmitry Medvedev ordered measures to ensure the safety of Russian nationals and tighten security around Russian sites in Kyrgyzstan, to protect them against possible attacks. The 2010 South Kyrgyzstan ethnic clashes occurred between the 2 main ethnic groups, the Uzbeks and Kyrgyz, in Osh. the second largest city in the country, on the 11th of June 2010. The clashes incited fears that the country could be heading towards a civil war. Finding it difficult to control the situation, Otunbayev, the interim leader, sent a letter to the Russian President, Dmitry Medvedev, asking him to send Russian troops to help the country control the situation. Medvedev's press attaché, Natalia Timokova, said in a reply to the letter, "It is an internal conflict and for now Russia does not see the conditions for taking part in its resolution." The clashes caused a shortage of food and other essential commodities, with more than 200 killed and 1,685 people hurt, as of the 12th of June 2010 update. The Russian government, however, said it would be sending humanitarian aid to the troubled nation. According to local sources, there was a clash between two local gangs and it did not take long for the violence to spread to the rest of the city. There were also reports that the armed forces supported ethnic Kyrgyz gangs entering the city, but the government denied the allegations. The riots spread to neighboring areas, and the government declared a state of emergency in the entire southern Jalalabad region. To control the situation, the interim government gave special shoot-to-kill powers to the security forces. The Russian government decided to send a battalion to the country to protect Russian facilities. Otunbayev accused the family of Bakiyev of instigating the riots. AFP reported, a veil of smoke covering the whole city. Authorities in neighboring Uzbekistan said at least 30,000 Uzbeks had crossed the border to escape the riots. Osh became relatively calm on the 14th of June 2010, but Jalalabad witnessed sporadic incidents of arson. The entire region was still under a state of emergency as Uzbeks were reluctant to leave their houses for fear of attacks by the mobs. The United Nations decided to send an envoy to assess the situation. Temir Sariev, deputy chief of the interim government, said there were local clashes and that it was not possible for the government to fully control the situation. He added that there were not sufficient security forces to contain the violence. Media agencies reported on the 14th of June 2010 that the Russian government was considering a request by the Kyrgyz government. An emergency meeting of Collective Security Treaty Organization was held on the same day to discuss the role it could play in helping to end the violence. Ethnic violence waned, according to the Kyrgyz government, by the 15th of June 2010, and Kyrgyz President Rosa Otunbayeva held a news conference that day and declared that there was no need for Russia to send in troops to quell the violence. There were at least 170 people left dead by the 15th of June 2010, but Pascal Wagner of the International Committee of the Red Cross said the official death toll was an underestimate. The UN High Commissioner told reporters in Geneva that evidence suggested that the violence seemed to have been staged up. Ethnic Uzbeks threatened to blow up an oil depot in Osh if they failed to get guarantees of protection. The United Nations said it believed that the attacks were orchestrated, targeted and well-planned. Kyrgyz officials told the media that a person suspected to be behind the violence in Jalalabad had been detained. On the 2nd of August 2010, a Kyrgyz government commission began investigating the causes of the clashes. Members of the National Commission, led by former Parliament Speaker Abdighania Kebaev, met with people from the predominantly ethnic Uzbek villages of Mady, Shark, and Kizil Kishtak in the Karasu district of Osh Oblast. This National Commission, including representatives of many ethnic groups, was established by a presidential decree. President Rosa Otunbayeva also said in August 2010 that an international commission would also be formed to investigate the clashes. The Commission's report, released in January 2011, concluded that the events in southern Kyrgyzstan constituted a planned, large-scale provocation, oriented towards the splitting of Kyrgyzstan and disrupting the unity of its people. Responsibility for this provocation was seen as lying with nationalistically minded leaders of the Uzbek community. In the aftermath of the turmoil, on 5 August 2010, Kyrgyz forces arrested party leader Ermat Baraktabasov on suspicion of plotting an overthrow of the government, after troops allegedly fired blank rounds into a crowd trying to join mass demonstrations near the parliament in the capital Bishkek. Acting President Rosa Otunbayeva said security forces seized firearms and grenades from him and 26 supporters.